It all started a little over a month ago. I've lived alone in this house for the past year, and up until now, I haven't had any issues. I had first moved to this small town in the middle of the Midwest a year ago after my job had to relocate me. I'm a factory manager, and I oversee the daily operations of a newly built factory on the outskirts of town. The moving part sucked, but once I was finally settled in and took a moment to view my surroundings, I was awestruck. The beauty of this town was simply breathtaking. I was never much of a nature guy. I spent most of my youth in a major city. But seeing the towering trees that wrapped around the entire town like a protective barrier made me feel safe. The intimidating mountains that formed the backdrop of our town were just as impressive. They gave the horizon character. It was truly a sight to behold. After around 10 months of living here, my company was opening up a new plant and they asked me if I could go oversee operations once again. However, this time I declined. I asked if I could stay on as the permanent manager to this location. They mentioned a slight pay decrease, but I didn't mind. Over the past year, everything was perfect. I'd wake up at around 6 a.m., do my daily morning ritual, stop by the local cafe which serves probably the best coffee on the planet, and be at work by 8 a.m. My job at the factory was quite simple. I was basically a glorified babysitter. I'd deal with discrepancies, do gratuitous amounts of paperwork, check in with my supervisors, and finally head home around 6 p.m. My job probably sounds very tedious and boring to a lot of you, but I still enjoy it. Plus, even with a pay cut, I was still making a pretty decent salary. I'm sure most of you aren't here to listen to me talk about my job or this town, however. At the beginning of last month, I caught a glimpse of something out in my backyard. The way my house is set up, my backyard butts right up to the surrounding tree line that encompasses the town. I had just gotten home from my job and was lying in bed watching some TV until around 10 p.m. When I was finally getting ready to go to sleep, I turned off the TV as well as my nightstand lamp. I had rolled over and was facing my bedroom window now, which pointed directly out into my backyard. It had snowed a few days prior, so my entire backyard had a thin layer of untouched snow. I was staring out of the window, letting my mind wander as I was beginning to drift off to a peaceful slumber, when I saw the flash of something near the tree line. Seeing whatever it was made my mind refocus itself as I scanned the trees outside. Not 5 minutes later, I saw them. Two eyes were shining in the tree line, reflecting light from some unknown source. They would bob up and down for a moment, before stopping and staring at my house. They would then turn to the right or left, disappear for a minute or two, then reappear at a different spot. At first, I thought it might have been a wolf or perhaps some other nocturnal creature foraging for food. I put it out of my thoughts and fell asleep. For the entire week straight, those eyes had become sort of a routine for me, as they appeared every night in the same exact spot. I would lie awake and watch them intently. I thought that perhaps the area in the trees was some sort of natural grazing spot, that whatever animal this was had become accustomed to eating here every night. I watched as the eyes walked left to right, disappeared and reappeared, until my tired eyes could no longer stay open. At the end of the first week, however, something happened. I had just finished turning off the TV and had rolled over to wait for the animal to arrive. A half hour passed, and I was just about to go to sleep when the eyes appeared. The eyes shined brightly in between the dark trees. After a few moments, the eyes seemed to get closer to my house. They were faintly growing in the distance. Then, once it crossed into the threshold into my backyard, my motion sensor lights I had set up on the back of my house went off. My eyes shot wide open, and I felt my heart rate slowly start to increase as I saw what was standing in my backyard. It looked like a man. Well, almost a man. It was hunched over on all fours like a dog. Its skin was bluish gray. Stringy black hair clung to its scalp like the legs of a spider. Its eyes were massive, taking up most of its face. The sudden bright light caused it to raise a hand to shield its eyes. Its fingers were disturbingly long, like bony sticks hovering over its face. The thing fell back and scrambled into the dark trees. After watching the event unfold, there was no way I was going back to bed after that. I got up from my bed and looked around my backyard. A few moments later, and the motion sensor lights diminished. I continued scanning the trees for any sign of this creature, but it was gone. I spent the rest of the night trying to find any information I could on what I had seen. I searched countless websites, putting in the description of what I saw. Most of them spoke of ghosts and demons, but this didn't seem like a demon to me. It looked like a very real thing in my backyard. Other websites mentioned various mythical creatures that had some similarities, but not much information regarding them. The following week, I watched my window every single night in case it came back. But every single night, I was met with nothing. I was starting to think that what I saw wasn't even real. That I had fallen asleep while watching the trees and that my mind had crafted this vivid nightmare. At the beginning of last week, however, I realized that it wasn't a nightmare. Well, not entirely. It was very real. I was heading to bed a bit later than usual, and as I laid there, I began watching through my window. I wasn't watching as intently as I was from the previous week. Then, after one long blink, it appeared. And this time, my heart thudded in my chest so hard that I thought it was going to stop at any moment. I could feel the air begin to sting my eyes as I hadn't shut them for 2 minutes straight. The reason I was so unnerved was that the creature was lowering its head from directly above the outside of my window. The roof of my house was still a fair distance from the top of my window, so that meant this creature was somehow clinging to the outside of my house, like a spider on a web. It stared into my window at me, our eyes locked in some deranged staring contest. I was wondering why my motion sensor lights hadn't gone off at all, but that thought quickly left my mind as I saw the creature reach its hand towards the glass. It began raking its sharp, jagged fingernails along the glass over and over again. The shrill sound that was produced from it digging its fingers into the glass was maddening. It's embarrassing to admit, but I was cowering at this point, too scared to think and too scared to move. It pulled its hand away from the window, and with a swift swing, it shattered the glass into pieces. When it did this, I fell back out of bed and onto the floor. I wanted to get up, to run out of there screaming my head off, but I couldn't seem to take my eyes off of the creature. It slithered its way through the broken window and crawled along the inside of my wall. It stopped once it reached the corner of my bedroom, and just stared at me. Its mouth began to crack open as if it hadn't opened its mouth for some time. Broken, sharp, rotted teeth filled its mouth as it seemed to smile at me. A slight feeling of disgust began to form within the overwhelming terror that gripped me. In one rapid movement, the creature lunged from the wall of my bedroom over to me. It grabbed at me with its long fingers while its mouth snapped wildly in my face. I could truly sense that this creature was trying to kill and eat me. While it flailed at me relentlessly, the commotion caused the lamp on my nightstand to topple over. I managed to switch it on with one hand while my other hand held the creature at bay. The sudden light seemed to blind the creature briefly. In that moment, I brought the lamp crashing down onto its head as hard as I could. It slumped over onto its side, and I shoved it off of me. I quickly got up, left the room, and called the police. I explained that a wild animal or something had broken into my house. They arrived shortly after, and I led them through my house into my bedroom. Though, when I opened my bedroom door, the creature was gone. They examined my broken window and realized that I was actually telling the truth. Though, when they asked me to describe what kind of animal it was, I stopped myself from telling them that it was a monster. I told them that I was sleeping and that it was too dark for me to see what it was. They nodded and told me to call them if it ever comes back. That was the beginning of last week, and I have since repaired my window and made sure my motion sensor lights were working properly. I'm not sure what that creature actually is. Maybe some of you out there have more experience with this and might know more. But as for me, well, I think I'm going to contact the higher-ups in my company and ask them if that new manager position is still available. If it is, well then I'll be more than happy to leave this place behind.